Yo, what's up? It's AWAL. Today I'm going to show you on my very first ever Ableton YouTube tutorial what I do when I set up my Ableton template. So let's dive in. Yo. What's good? Got my coffee, ready to rock and roll. Alright, so this is my standard Ableton template. So whenever I open up Ableton, this is what it starts out as. And this is kind of what I use for dubstep tunes and bass music tunes, and I find it's a great starting point to get my ideas down fast. Alright, so I can go through it all, but I think what would work better and what we can learn is if we just delete it all and we go through making it together and how I do my sidechain and everything. Alright, so I'm going to delete all of this before I even explain what's on it. Let's delete. Oh, I can't delete them all, can I? Alright, delete. And then I'm just going to insert an audio track. I'm going to delete this too. Alright, so the first thing that I start out with when I go to make any song, almost any song, and this is just me, everybody has different preferences, but I always start with a kick. So we're going to call this a kick. And I don't do a lot of processing on my kicks because I really find that if you have a good sample, I'll try and build a track around a sample sounding awesome. And if a good kick sounds great to begin with, then let's make it shine. But what I do use on my kick drums very often is Neutron. And what I love about Neutron, especially for kick drums, is the transient shaper. And how it works is it's pretty simple. It can be multi-band if you want, and I can boost the attack or take down the sustain, or boost the sustain and take down the attack. Anyways, I can just really hone in on getting a great kick and making sure that it punches through by adjusting the transient of it. It also has a compressor and an EQ. Anyways, so I'll usually start with one of those, but just have it doing nothing. I'll just have it loaded up there because every track's different, every kick's different. So I have that set up and loaded in there. Alright, next track. Boom. Snare. Key. Major key. Alright, so I got a kick, a snare. What else is in every dubstep tune? Or bass music tune, house tune. Doesn't matter, I use this template for everything. I call this one some hats. Hats are important. Kick, snare, hats. What I also like to do is put hats, crash, and we'll call this other highs of sorts. And I'm going to take all of those and group them and just call this group highs. And maybe you can make all these the same color. Let's make them. I like them blue. Blue's my jam. Anyways, let me just make this one blue. It's kind of green, isn't it? Blue. All right, so we got a kick, snare, and highs. Now, what I like to do on my highs before I, because it's a template, so this is stuff that I do on every single track, so might as well do it from the start. Is I'm going to roll off probably everywhere below, 450, let's say. And I'm also, on that, I'm going to put a imager. So I use Ozone's 8's imager just because it's a little multi-band. And, obviously every track's a little different, but chances are I'm probably going to want to spread, above 1.5K. And spread a little bit of the high end to the sides, so that's going to be my high buses. So any of my hats are just getting spread just a little bit, not a lot, and it's just kind of in the high end. And then I make sure that anything, hats, crashes, other high cymbals and stuff, there's no sub frequencies in there. That's all I was doing. Basically, I do a lot of what I call safekeeping. It might something like this might not be necessary, but in the end, I'm just double checking to make sure that there's no sub frequencies in there. Shouldn't have any, anyways. All right, next up, after my highs, I'm going to insert, let's say, a MIDI track. And this one, I'm just going to call this bass 1. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to load up just a serum instance on there, leave it at the initialized preset. I'm going to duplicate that, call this bass 2, because chances are I'm probably going to have at least 2 serum basses in whatever song I'm making. It doesn't matter what it is. You know, and I think my other one actually has 3, because really, that's, I mean, I'm going to use a lot of instances of serum, and no matter what song I'm doing. What I like to do is group them all, and I call this one basses. It's weird that this one's blue now, because in my other project it's purple. So let's get it purple. Alright, so make all these purple too. Next up, after my basses, I have, I'll put in one here. I'm going to call this FX1. So this is going to be my sweeps, my risers, my impacts, all of those. You know, and I'll generally make a couple of those. Group, whoops. So there's all kinds of shortcuts and stuff you guys can be using for these. We're going to call this FX bus, FX2, FX3. Alright, and so then group all of those together. Boom. Done. I generally don't have a sub in my template, just because how I have been doing my subs, especially in dubstep music, is I will I'll write out my basses, and then I'll duplicate the bass group that I've written, and go in and change all the oscillators so it's just like a sub oscillator, and process my sub kind of later on down the road. So it's just not really important for me to have a sub right off the get-go, because it's going to be different every song, and I'm going to need to put something different in. Alright, so here's where we get to do some fun stuff. So I do my sidechain in a bus at the top, most of my sidechain. And the reason being is I like to be quick. Everything that I do is all about being quick and all about being efficient and making sure my workflow is super tight. So especially this is why I set up this template to begin with. Alright, so how I do my sidechain is I create a track at the top, and I just call this one Sidechain Bus. Alright, and on this track, I'm going to route anything that needs to be sidechained to this. I like to use LFO Tool for my sidechaining. Reason being is I can visually see the line and the curve that it's making. Whereas if I'm using a compressor, I have to go a lot by ear, which is great, and I'm not a huge issue there. But I like having the option to visually change things right here, and I really only need to change one parameter. Whereas if I'm using a compressor, I need to play around with the threshold and the attack and the release and making sure that it fits just right. Whereas here, I can move this around and shape this however I want for each kick that I'm using in the song and snare. So I'll do that, and I always make sure that I like to have a huge side chain because I really want my drums to punch. So it always ducks all the way. And usually leave it around there. You want to make sure, depending on what genre of music you're making, I have my tempo set to 150, just so that it loads up. It's always 150. So how LFO Tool works in terms of getting it to trigger when your kick triggers, let me show you. So I'm going to insert a MIDI track, and this one I'm going to call Trigger. Whoops. Trigger. And this, I'm going to go in and I'm going to create a little MIDI note on here. Doesn't matter where, we'll say C1, and there we go. Now we just have a MIDI note playing nothing. And so what we're going to do is we're going to send this MIDI information over to our sidechain bus to trigger that LFO tool. To do that, if you load up an external instrument, and then you say MIDI output here, if you send it to the sidechain bus, and then there's going to be a bunch of different options for which input on LFO Tool, but number 1 is all that you want there. So now our information from this MIDI note is being sent and triggering here. But what you need to do, make sure, is you need to select note retrig. That's important. And so now it'll only retrig when that MIDI note plays. Alright, something else I like to do on my sidechain, and remember earlier when I was talking about safekeeping, this is extreme safekeeping. So I like to separate my bands on this sidechain bus and do an extra little, as I said, safekeeping to just make sure that none of my sub frequencies are clashing in my kick drum and my sub. And this works great if you have 808s and some other like super bassy frequencies, to make sure that none of them are clashing as well. So how this works is I've loaded up a multi-band dynamics, and I'm not going to do anything with it. I'm just going to use it to split the frequencies. So how this works, and this is great for splitting if you need to isolate the mids or the highs or the lows on anything. This is a great way to do it. So I'm going to group this. And so now I have one copy of it here, so I'm going to duplicate that. So Command D is going to duplicate it 3 times. I'll name this one high, mid, low. What I'm going to do on each one of these is, now that it's separated 3 times, I'm going to take the highs and I'm going to solo the highs. So now this one's only going to play the highs. This one is only going to play the mids. And this one is only going to play the lows. And because I have them grouped, I can now add whatever effects and processing I want after this section, and those effects will only be applied to the that specific band of frequencies. So let's do that. Let's get it. So what I like to do, as I said, we're going to do some safekeeping here. This might be total overkill, but because this is my template, I'm only going to do it once, never going to do it again. So here I'm going to load up a compressor. I'm going to put it here on my low chain. So my mids and my highs don't have it, just the lows. And this, I'm going to take my sidechain input from my kick, sidechain, kick, bring my threshold down, maybe bring the ratio up, let me release down. I can test it out later, but basically that's kind of like a basic sidechain setup that's only sidechaining the lows. And so, reason being for that is now I know for a fact that there shouldn't be, no matter what I send to this sidechain bus, there shouldn't be any low frequencies, and that the cutoffs like below 120 hertz. You can see that here. There shouldn't be anything below 120 hertz clashing with anything with the kick, right? And so say I had, on that kick track, say I made this bus, and I had like an 808, a really long kick. Basically this would make sure that none of that 808 clashes with any of my other low frequencies within my track. So just kind of safekeepings. Most of the time it's not going to do too much because LFO Tool is already taking care of most of the sidechain. But because it's template and do things once and set it and forget it. What I also like to do, and this might be personal preference, I insert another one here, and I call this one light chain. And this one, I'm also going to send this information to it. So how I do that, easy way, group this, go here, duplicate this, and now you can send this information here to light chain. But first, I'm going to put on LFO Tool. And for light chain, it's a similar thing, but I'm just going to do a bit of a lighter sidechain. And on this one, generally what I'm going to do is, if I have anything, say like higher synths and saws and stuff that don't need like a huge ducking sidechain to make, like to duck under the kick. Sorry, coughing. All right. Yeah, so that's what I use that for. Maybe vocals or anything that just needs, not a heavy sidechain, just a light chain. That's what I call that. So here, this first one, make sure to go to sidechain bus. The second one, we're going to go to light chain. And so now that trigger is going to happen. So when we go and put our kick drums and our snares and stuff, we're going to put this trigger on every beat. So every time we want it to sidechain, we're going to put that trigger. You know, and then that allows me to, you know, easily adjust the sidechain for that whole bus. And then what I'm going to want to do after I get all this set up, I'm going to send, for example, my basses, which I know are going to be sidechain for sure. I'm going to send those to sidechain bus. I'm going to make sure that I select in, and then my my input up there. I actually don't need an input, but so now if I have any of these basses, let's set up a clip here just to make sure we're all good. All right, that's good. So play that, and let's load up our MIDI trigger that I deleted by accident. Whoops. Such a buffoon of me. Alright. So you're going to hear it. It should duck right in the middle. Alright. So that's it. We know it's working. It's going to our sidechain bus, and it's ducking when that trigger happens. Next up, which I forgot to delete before, but we can show you how. I'll show you anyways. I have 3 sends set up. I have Valhalla Room, and then I have an EQ after Valhalla Room. You know, play around with whatever reverb settings you want. I'm a big fan of Dark Hall 2, playing around with that preset. Sometimes I'll mess with the decay. You know, EQing out the super low ends because you don't want any super low reverb stuff. Again, this is mostly just safekeeping, making sure that nothing crazy gets through. You know, set it, forget it. Something that we do want to send, though, I always like to send my reverb back to my sidechain bus to make sure that reverb gets sidechained too, right? Same with my delay. And then this fun little send that I have set up, this is a tip that I got from Wooly and Company, and I think Ray Volpe was on that stream too. Shout out those guys. So they put a rectifier on a send. And basically, in here, this is something that you'd want to use on sort of like your higher basses and stuff. By adding a little bit of that rectified layer, it really adds a little bit of crunch and some saturation, but still kind of maintains your regular sound. It's a great effect for filling out your mixes. So I do that, and then I make sure that also gets sent back to our sidechain bus. Then, my master channel. Okay, so here, some of you guys might laugh at this, but I'll just break it down to start. Alright, first thing, an imager. I just like to boost the width of my kind of higher bands, and then I'll always take, you know, my sub band and make it mono, just to double check and make sure that you know, anything down there is mono, because you don't want any wild stereo information in the super low frequencies. They'll end up muddying things up. Next, I have an EQ, and this is just doing some mid-side stuff. So on the sides, I'm rolling off the end. So this is, again, it's more just safekeeping, right? You know, I don't need any stereo information below 100 hertz. This imager is doing the same thing, but so I have it there. It's all set up. So when I go to do a master, it's there and it's set up. Ozone 8 I have there. It's not even turned on. It's just there because I know I'm eventually going to go and use it. Nothing is there and set up. But when I go to master the track, and you know, as I kind of progress throughout producing it, I'll start, you know, turning on, you know, the maximizer and the equalizer and whatnot. To be fair, I don't use the Ozone 8 maximizer as much as I use the FabFilter Pro L limiter. This limiter, to me, I think you can, especially for heavy bass music, I think you can push it a little harder and get it a little louder without distorting as much. I find I can just push it a little more than I can the Ozone 8 one. However, like, it depends on the genre that you're making. You know, I'm making dubstep and some heavy aggressive music. For that, the Pro L works a little better. if I was making, maybe hip hop or pop music or whatnot, the ozone maximizer might work a little better. All right, and the last thing I have on my master channel is actually a sausage fattener. Now, before you guys laugh and call me crazy and whatnot, I always have this at 1%, and what that does is it just catches any of those big peaks, limits them, and adds a little bit of distortion, and just adds a little bit of grit to the song and the master. This is something I only do for heavy and aggressive bass tracks, which is like 90% of what I do. So I included it in my template. Before you bash it, give it a try. Try it out, and to be honest, it does sound great, which is kind of funny. And so that's my template. Once you're done creating your own template, or if you want to use this one, which I'm going to leave a link to the download in the description, just go Preferences, then Look and Feel. No, I lied. File and Folder. You can go File and Folder, and then Save Current Set as Default. And then you click the Save button, and once you do that, every time you go to open up Ableton, this template will load up. Alright, hope you guys enjoyed. Thanks for listening. Be sure to subscribe to this channel. I know this is my first tutorial video, but I'm going to try and post one a week. Until then, give me a follow on the SoundCloud, to the Instagram, Twitter, whatever you want. Hope you guys are enjoying what I'm doing. And drop a comment in the video. Tell me what you think. Tell me what you guys want me to cover in the future. I'm always down to chat and hang out and whatnot. And also, if you guys are looking for private one-on-one lessons and sessions with me, feel free to give me a message or an email on any of my socials. I'll get back to you as soon as I can. And let's set something up. Let's make some dope music. All right, peace out.